Good morning. Welcome to Easier Said Than Done on Grounds for Stop and Search. Tina, I think you might be the. Oh, we've got some more people coming in. Okay, this is always the worry when you start these things and people trickle in. This is the earliest time that we've started one of these sessions, so hopefully we'll get more people joining as we go through. Really pleased to welcome Paul Dawson from MOPAC to talk to us today about stop and search, and there's quite an extensive piece of research, Paul, which you can give us a background on. But we are going to talk particularly this morning about grounds for stop and search and a particular piece that you've done on that. And unusually for this format, Paul is going to do a bit of work talking us through some of the specifics of it with some slides. But Paul, if you want to introduce yourself, and then I'll do a bit of do some housekeeping things for people as they come in.
That's fine, thank you. Let me share my screen. Then hopefully through the magic of technology.
Okay, we can see that. Thank you.
You should see the slides.
Yep, that's great.
Yeah.
If you could just give us, before you launch into the full slide set, just give us a bit of background on you and MOPAC and the work you do in the department, and then I'll just talk to people through the format of what we're going to do. I'm just playing for time while people still come in.
Well, I have those in the slides anyway, so I can do the first couple if that's okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Paul Dawson, as Matt mentioned. I'm head of something called the MOPAC Evidence and Insight team. Now, it's good to be here, so thanks for the invite, Matt and SEBP. What I want to do today is take you through, as Matt said, some recently published research on stop and search we have, which I hope is fairly groundbreaking. Groundbreaking is a very easy word to use. And then you can kind of absolutely make your minds up in terms of if it is groundbreaking or not. But in terms of the basics, before we go into the details, because not everyone will have heard of MOPAC, of Mayor's Office Policing and Crime. So this slide here is, I would always describe this slide as the one to hang on the wall in terms of who we are as a team. So the left-hand side sets out who we are. So we're Evidence and Insight. We're a team of researchers based at the Mayor's Office of Policing and Crime. Some of the team, including myself, were based at the Met Police for many years, and the team was poached by City Hall in 2014, and we were pulled across to MOPAC, where we joined forces with a range of analysts that were already at City Hall to form Evidence and Insight. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the varied range of kind of research crafts we have. So we have performance function that does lots of work around police and performance, police and crime plan performance frameworks, published data dashboards, a range of ongoing analytics into crime and so on. We have a social research and evaluation function, and that focuses on a range of different evaluations that MOPAC commissions out, because MOPAC is a commissioner of services, and we want to know if those work or not. We conduct a range of surveys, and the survey specifically to understand what Londoners think about police in general, trust, confidence in police, as well as victims of crime. And then we also have a data science team that does a whole host of data modeling, forecasting, automation, machine learning, and other really cool stuff. And just that mix itself, or that mix, is really important to me. This means that we're varied enough to respond to all the wide range of questions that we get. We can answer them using lots of different crafts. And the whole point of the team is to help MOPAC in its statutory role of holding the police to account in something I kind of affectionately call evidence-based oversight. So Matt, that's really brief, kind of who I am and a bit on the team and our role in the Mayor's Office Policing and Crime.
That's brilliant. Yeah, and you did well not to mention your book, because you've written a book on evidence-based oversight. So I give you a plug for that, and you can talk about it a bit as we go on. Okay, so on this series of webinars, what we try to do is sort of unpick not the technical side usually of how the evidence has been generated, but what it means in practice. So they'll be slightly different because there is such a novel methodology that's gone into pulling this together, and Paul and his team are responsible for that. So Paul will talk a little bit about that. The real aim of these is to give audiences the opportunity to speak directly to people involved and who've been there and done it. So please do use the Q&A function as we go through, and I will interject, Paul, any after you've finished your slides, we'll get into some question and answers, and I've got my own set that I'll put to you in due course. You should be able to see behind me on my what is my right hand shoulder QR code, which is to give us some feedback, because we like to find out how we're doing with these things, what we can do better. That's part of us being evidence based. So I encourage you to fill that in, and I will nag you all on email to do that afterwards. But that is more than enough from me. So Paul, over to you to give us the full lowdown on this work.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much. Okay, let me get my screen. There we go. So as Matt mentioned, we've recently published some peer-reviewed analytics on stop and search, which you can see on the website. So when the slides are shared, bottom left of my slide, you can see the link to the full piece we published recently that you can see on the MOPAC website. One part of the work looks at the general perceptions towards the power of stop and search. It looks at the specific experiences those who have been stopped and searched for our surveys, as I mentioned in previous slides. And we also look at the value of procedural justice within those stop encounters. So that's really interesting work on the value of wider perceptions of stop and search and how it's done. We have another part that's specifically trying to look at what's driving the levels of disproportionality we see in stop and search, so we can understand what's in the police's control and what's out of the police's control. But really the final aspect, and what we want to look at today and what Matt's asked me to talk about, is the aspect of the research that specifically looked at exploring the grounds and the underlying documented grounds officers document within their stop encounters. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Probably given the time and audience, I probably won't say too much about the wider background of stop and search. We could have wider questions on that, Matt, later on. There are lots of discussions about the power's efficacy, the disproportionality that we see, especially towards Black Londoners, London as well as nationally, and lots of discussions about the wider value of the power. What we were going to look at, and what we did look at, was specifically in terms of the grounds. There has been previous research that shows that Black Londoners have seen, or are more likely to see, vaguer or more subjective grounds within their stops. That was done on a fairly small local level. And what I wanted to do was really scale that up to a level that hasn't been looked at before. And that's what we're going to look at today. So in terms of the data that we had, what we had was essentially all grounds free text data from every stop and search in London in 2023. So that's over 152,000 stops that took place. And fairly scarily, when you look at that, that's over or nearly 17 million words of text. So huge amounts of data from what the officers had documented for their stop. I guess I'd probably guess that this audience are fairly familiar with the grounds texts, but if you are not, I've got a couple of examples I've put on the slides. So this was one of the very first grounds texts I ever looked at when we first got the data, and this one just popped out. This one, I'll give a little bit of time so you can read through it, but as you can see, it's fairly subjective in the nature of its ground. The officer talks about furtive glances, someone looking away, the officer feeling it was a deviation from the baseline, couldn't see lumps or bulges, but he had a padded upper half, you know. Probably fairly subjective and vague stop. And for example, the one on the right that I have is much more evidence and intelligence based. So I'll just kind of pause while you skim the screen and read it. But essentially what you can see is we had 152,000 blocks of text like these. So for every stop and search, what the officer has documented into their grounds for that stop encounter in their own words. So fantastic data set. Okay. So the first step we wanted to do is develop a coding framework to try and make sense and manage all of this text. We started with a range of previous academic work that was published by the College of Policing a few years ago, who did something similar in terms of coding grounds manually. And we then had the research team that I mentioned at the beginning of the session kind of iteratively look at that with a sample of the grounds text. And we worked with a number of experts in stop and search who are involved in local community scrutiny, who I'll say more about on the next slide, in terms of kind of iterating and refining the coding framework. So what you can see on this slide here on the right-hand side are just the top 9 headings that the team coded within. So you can see each of these themes, within each of these themes, there are kind of sub-statements that the team would read through the ground text and kind of tick if things are happening or not. So you can see, you know, subject, demeanor, intelligence use. Well, look, if the officer described the person as looking nervous, they would, under the subject demeanor, click nervous. You know, fairly straightforward coding. This is like the top level thematic aspects. In the full published product, we published the full coding framework. So it's completely replicatable if you wanted to look at that. And then the next step, obviously, once we developed the coding framework, we then worked with members of the MOPAC Disproportionality Board's expert reference group. So they're the ones that helped us within some of the development of the actual coding framework. They then essentially manually coded up 600 grounds texts. And that was a whole host of developing the coding framework, tweaking it, improving it, and then finally they coded up that number. And I think that in itself, so manually coding up 600 grounds texts could easily have been the project, because that is still quite a large sample of stop and searches. And that could have been really interesting findings, but we wanted to go further. And I think this is where it gets really exciting and innovative. And you know, we work with the data science team, and then through natural language processing, we were able to train a series of models to code up in the same way, but across the entire sample of 152,000 stops, all 17 million words. So you know, nothing at this size or scale has been done before. And because of that, we were very aware around things like peer reviewing. I'm kind of jumping to the end on peer reviewing, but we did a lot of peer reviewing. You know, we shared all the code to the peer reviewers and went, look, this is the first time we've tried this. Does this make sense? And the answer was yes. And then I probably won't go into too much detail in terms of the details, but just to say, in the published product, we do go into more detail. And I think, Matt, like you were saying, if there's interest from a technological perspective, very happy to arrange another session or provide more details about the tech aspect of the work. And I guess what I'd say is that, you know, what this isn't ChatGPT, but it's not using publicly available AI in any way. It's very much building separate models through natural language processing that was specifically trained on the grounds text and the coding that we did, with a range of kind of verifications and quality checks. So we were absolutely able, and we got to the position where we could code up the entire data set through this manner. That's incredibly exciting. So that's kind of the data we had and the what or the how we did it. In terms of some basic results, I'll take you through now. So at a fairly descriptive level, some of these things may or may not be interesting, but we'll see how we go. So on average, the grounds text that we had was 111 words. Maybe interesting, maybe not. As you can see from the bottom right-hand side of the slide, we saw some variation across London in terms of the length of the grounds text. So Southeast London saw a larger number of average words in their texts. In terms of ethnicity differences at this stage, really didn't see very much in terms of word count, word lengths. We also looked at spelling mistakes, and if certain groups had more spelling mistakes in their grounds than others. But at that aspect, not much, nothing came out. What I have on the bottom of this slide, and I'll say a bit more on the next slide, is that we did see in the grounds texts certain words like violent was more likely or significantly more likely to appear for black stops rather than white stops. And that's even looking at the same type of stop. So let's look at weapon-enabled stops. And obviously you do data science and you get word clouds, but it's really cool ways of just trying to explore what were the kind of main predominant word that came out. And again, not a huge amount of difference here, but words like violence came out more on the black stops rather than the white stops, which was interesting in itself. Now, this slide kind of shows that Black Londoners were significantly more likely to receive vaguer, more subjective documented grounds, and white more evidential. This was very much our main research questions coming into the research. As I said at the beginning, previous work has shown that Black individuals see vaguer grounds. So this was kind of the main focus of the research. Do we see that in London at a much larger scale? And the chart you can see on here are all the significant differences. So the red bars are the factors where it's more likely to be documented for Black Londoners. So, for example, if you look at the slide, wearing concealing clothing, mention of the area being known for weapons or known for robbery, a statement that in the officer's view that the individual attempted to avoid police contact or the individual became aware of the police, were uncooperative, smell of drugs, and so on. Those are the ones that were more significantly likely to be present in Black Londoners. And you can look at the list on your own time on the left-hand side of the chart. So those were significantly more likely to be documented in the grounds of Black Londoners. And the blue bars are the significant differences where white Londoners were more likely to receive. And as you can see, those ones are generally more evidential. You know, subject seen stealing, subject admitted being in possession of drugs. And in white stops, it was also clearer what was being searched for. So again, that's, I think, a really interesting and powerful finding in itself, but then we wanted to go a little bit further still. And what we did is develop a quality of grounds metric for a range of different statistical analyses. And by quality, and whenever I mention quality from this point on, when I'm talking about quality being not related to the wider procedural aspects. When I'm talking about kind of quality of the ground, I'm talking about the statistical likelihood that it will find something or not. So we did a range of analytics to understand of the grounds that we coded up that you've just seen, which of those were more related to receiving a positive outcome, which of those were related to getting a no further action. So essentially, the higher quality, the more likely a positive outcome, the lower quality, the more likely an NFA. So the quality when I say that from now on, that's what I'm referring to. And even the analytics towards this could be interesting. So for example, you probably see from the diagram and the chart in the middle. So for example, where officers would write things down such as, subject attempting to avoid contact or concealing clothing. Those things weren't related to positive outcomes. They were related to NFAs. You know, you could argue, but the police maybe they're using their instincts, they're identifying people with certain type of clothes, and they're getting a good hit rate, so to speak. That's not the case. You know, concealing clothing, attempting to avoid contact, they were related to no further actions. So even this could be interesting for wider implications around stop and search and grounds more generally. So then we have our grounds quality metric. We then explore that in a number of ways. So on the left-hand side, what you can see is that, again, so even on the quality metric, Black Londoners see significantly lower levels of quality. And that's specifically driven by certain types of stop, which I have just highlighted on the screen. So stolen property, going equipped, weapons, points, and blades, and so on, the ones I've highlighted in red, are the ones where Black Londoners see a significantly lower level of quality in their grounds text. And it's interesting at this point that drugs, for example, obviously, which is the most voluminous stop and search, the quality is no difference in that specific search type. But there are certain ones where they do see significantly lower quality. And then on the right-hand side, we track the volume of stops throughout the day. That's the vertical bar graph that you can see. And we also show quality and how that varies throughout the day. So at the bottom, the vertical bar graph, I think that's the right name for it, just shows both black and white volume of stop and searches through the day. So you can see very low numbers of volume. The lowest volume is around 6 and 7 o'clock during the day for both groups. Then we have an increase throughout the day, a peak of around 4 or 5 o'clock for both groups, then a slow decline. So both black and white have the same broad trend of volume of stop and search throughout the day, which isn't surprising. What we do see, though, is the two lines you can see, the orange line and the blue line, that's the average, that's the quality by that time of day. So, for example, for both black and white, the highest levels of quality. Oh, actually, I have a laser pen. There we go. And the highest levels of quality are very much where the volume is the lowest. Now, maybe that's not surprising. Low volume, better quality. Maybe that's not surprising. Probably not. But then, as you can see, for white stop and search grounds quality, it stays pretty much static then throughout the rest of the day. Whereas for black Londoners, yes, we have the peak in the early morning when the volume was the lowest, but then we see a real dip in quality when the volume increases in the way we don't see for white Londoners. So again, quite an interesting difference between black and white Londoners' quality of the day. So, potentially really targeted level of insight in terms of the findings. I need to turn off my... There we go. We also looked at that quality variable by age. And again, this is a fairly straightforward slide, but what's interesting is that we see a really clear difference, significantly so, whereas, younger Londoners saw a much lower level of quality. So some of these numbers, as you can see on the chart, are very low sample size. So age 10 and 11, there are only 93 stops of 10 and 11-year-olds in our data, so very low numbers. But the other kind of young age groups, absolutely fine in terms of quality sizes. And you can see kind of 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, significantly lower levels of quality in their documented stop than older adults. And then finally, in terms of us exploring the quality metric, we also looked at does the quality metric vary by borough? And it does. So as you can see on the left-hand side of this slide, quality metric is lower in kind of the inner London areas, and it's higher in some of the outer London areas of London, which is fine, which is interesting. And then what I really like is the right-hand side, where we saw a relationship between the quality of the encounter and the public perceptions of the power. So essentially, the better the quality in the stop and search ground, the more positive the wider perception was on the power being used fairly in the MOPAC Public Attitude Survey. Now, that's really interesting in terms of, obviously, there's wider discussions around trust and confidence and how stop and search can impact or not trust and confidence. This kind of tells me that the public are able to pick up when stop and search is being done well. And that's really interesting implication in terms of trust and confidence, but also wider stop and search. And then just bringing the last few slides together. So we've talked about kind of ethnicity and age and type of stop. We just did some kind of regression analytics at the end to work out, of all the different things that we've been looking at so far, which are the significant variables that that we retain in understanding the low levels of quality. And as you can see on the slide, the ones that were retained, or the significant factors that explained the lower quality of stop grounds encounters, as you can see, weapons, points, blades, young, ML7 task force, and that includes TSG in London, black ethnic appearance, male gender, were the kind of factors that were significantly predicting the lower levels of quality in stop encounters. And then before I talk about some kind of next steps and recommendations and so on, I wanted to just show you this tool. So one of the practical applications of the work, really keen on kind of the practical applications, is that we developed a tool that we call the Groundskeeper. Forgive the slight quirky sense of humor, but I think it fits. It fits. And essentially, it uses the analytics and the work that we've done and allows you to kind of insert your grounds text, and then we will automatically score that grounds text based on the coding that we did. And we'll also give you specific feedback on the grounds text based on kind of what was included in the text. So I hope you can see this, but on the screen you can see the grounds text that I started off with at the beginning, the one with furtive looks and so on. That's on the page. Put in the Groundskeeper tool, gets a fairly low score, as you wouldn't be surprised. And then the blurb before, which you might be able to see. So the actual ground text goes in here. It gives it the score here, and it gives then some kind of feedback on that ground text in terms of the aspects that it includes. So again, a really interesting tool that we can share with supervisors, with community groups in stop and search, for example. So really cool. So that's the main analytics. I've just got a couple of slides left where we just talk about a little bit of the, as I said on here, the so what's and the next steps. So on the left-hand side of this slide, you can see just a range of aspects that we included in the published work. So we can identify differences in ground stops as we've done. We're not certain at this stage why we see the differences that we've seen. As I said on the slide, it could be due to training gaps, could be due to operational pressures, could be due to other biases. We don't quite know, but we know we want to do a bit more analytics and work into the area. We know we want a range of wider strategic conversations, and we are having these with College of Policing, NPCC, APCC, SEBP is why we're here today, to kind of really share the work and the implications and the so what's. We also said that we would replicate this work on an annual basis. So then we can track things like the quality of grounds annually over time to see if we're seeing progress or not in this area, which will be really interesting because obviously the Met launched their stop and search charter last year. So by the time we get to the 2025 data, which isn't too far away, we'll be able to see if there's any practical difference post-Met charter, which we hope there would be. The bottom left of this slide just talks a little bit about what the Met's response has been to the work. And generally, it's been good. It's been a really good response. The Met made a number of commitments in the pack that we published in terms of looking in more detail at a local level into officer supervision around the quality of grounds. So they've agreed to take on, and they've committed to take on learning in this area. And obviously there's going to be more work where we do this together and try and understand what's going on in the topic. And then on the right, I've just got some wider reflections. As said, we want to replicate this on an annual basis and track quality. But in doing this replication, we can also add new analytic aspects in. So I'm interested in looking at things like officers' length of service, and if that relates to the grounds quality in any way. I want to look at a bit more detail around, the whole notion of legal, non-legal. I think it's a little bit too simplistic, and maybe we could look at different types of ground, rank them in different levels of quality, and understand what's the best kind of combination of grounds. And of course, as I showed you on the previous slide, the Groundskeeper tool, I think, is a really valuable application potentially for local scrutiny groups, supervisors, in terms of assessing the quality of stop and search grounds texts. So as I said, we've done this so far on the 2023 data. We have the 2024 data, and we're doing the same analysis now. And hopefully we'll then get the 2025 data, and then we're able to look at this over a number of years. And then finally, from a tech perspective, I think there's some kind of recommendations and next steps. I do think that merging of human coding, that was theoretically informed human coding and natural language processing, is terribly, terribly, terribly exciting. This isn't just let AI loose on text. This is theoretically informed and guided in that way. And that's what I'm really happy about that. And I think that's got a lot of wider applications. Now, that could be for other forces that end up watching this and going, oh, could you code up our grounds? Or could we compare our ground to the Met's grounds? And we can start looking at kind of national comparisons in this area. That's completely possible for us to do, and terribly, again, a really exciting area. And I'd be interested if anyone's interested in that type of discussion. But I also think there could be wider applications of the technology. So, if there's any other area that you have that is generating huge amounts of text, is the technology that we've used able to be used in certain other areas potentially? I mean, that's a really interesting question of making sense of a huge amounts of data. Remember, we had 70 million grounds texts, 70 million words that we're able to kind of pull down and understand. So the wider application of that, I think, are really interesting. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, I've just got, it's worth remembering that the grounds analytics that you've seen is part of a wider range of innovation that we're doing at the moment at MOPAC, especially in the team here, Evidence and Insight, been driven by a lot of the data science team that we have now. So some of these I think are really exciting from this technological perspective. We've developed a tool, like an interactive crime forecasting tool, where you can create your own scenarios and see what that does into the forecast of crime, for example. But it's interactive. Oh, so maybe I want to look at violent crime. Oh, and I want to see what happens to violent crime if the temperature goes up or goes down. Could be no violent crime and temperature are associated. That kind of interactive scenario modeling, I think, is really cool in terms of trying to get ahead of the curve in terms of demand modeling. We've got automated statistical products. We've got chatbots over MOPAC policies. So obviously there are a whole host of different MOPAC, for example, HR policies. And we can have a chatbot over just the HR policies to bring that together, that you can put search terms in and find your information at the touch of a button. Chatbots over the teams or the research team's work. And we're also doing some work where we'll be then doing kind of similar exercise, but for the coding of body-worn video footage. And so can we automate some of the body-worn video footage coding? So there's lots of wider tech innovation. And I think and this is a really exciting space for both evidence-based oversight, but also for policing. So I hope this has been useful. So it's very much been an overview of some research that we have. It's the first time we've done this. And as I said, we can do this now annually over time. We'll try and tweak it. We'll try and improve it. And at MOPAC, we do lots of work on an acronym I call DIAL, so Data, Insight, Action, Learning. And I think this piece, we have really good data and we have fantastic insights. And what we're keen on doing now is driving the actions. Now, the actions can be from the Met perspective and some of their commitments. It can be from the MOPAC perspective in terms of oversight of stop and search, because also could be actions from a wider audience who maybe are interested in the work, interested in how we've done it and want to work together. And then do the actions, let's use this work somehow, and then let's get some learning and some feedback in terms of how it's gone. And I think this is just a good example of really actionable analytics. So yeah, Matt, I think hopefully that's useful.
Yeah, it's great.
Around the time I think I wanted to talk. So thank you for that, and I'm happy that we take questions.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I've got a few that have come through in the chat bar. Please, people, feel free to keep going as we keep talking. I'm just going to divide these up into kind of specific ones about the methodology, and then we'll go a bit broader. Got a few questions on here from David Gin. So what 3 boroughs were used, Paul, and how were they selected? What was the pathway there?
Oh, so the 3 boroughs we picked were Kensington, Chelsea, Haringey, and Barking and Dagenham. And that was due to, at the time, we were doing some other work around stop and search, around disproportionality and stop and search. And those 3 boroughs were picked being a borough with high, middle, and low levels of disproportionality. And we have a small footer on the slide that it is based on 3 boroughs. So we selected those, we randomly 3 boroughs and then randomly selected grounds from those boroughs. That was kind of linked to the wider work we were doing in sort of stop and search disproportionality.
Do you want to take your slides off just while we're there? That'd be great, thank you. Do you think so? Just on that, the line of thinking in that question, would you anticipate? I mean, this is a little bit of Schrodinger's question. Would you anticipate wildly different results from a different 3 boroughs being chosen?
Well, I think that's one of the limitations in that we only did it for the 3 boroughs. I mean, like I said, we tried to get a mix of those 3 boroughs, and it's one of the things we do want to improve on in future iterations of the work. Like I said, it's the first time we've done this. We are kind of assuming that the boroughs that we've picked and their grounds are somehow representative of the wider London. Yeah, I take that. But again, that was, we linked it to another piece of work we had on stop and search at the time, and they linked together really nicely into those 3 boroughs.
Yeah, that's always the researcher's game, isn't it? Having to make a series of choices that they're going to get critiqued for later on. But I think that makes some sense. I guess the question, and I'll come back to David's other questions. A question I have about the methodology, and you mentioned you're doing it on 2024. You built this Groundskeeper tool, and obviously one eye on making this quite scalable. Is it feasible to do this for all boroughs and provide this as sort of London wide, and I guess scaling up from there nationwide?
Hopefully. So I said, this is the first time we've done this. I think super innovative, super exciting. We have got 2024 data, so we're replicating the work there. We're due to get the 2025 data hopefully soon, and we're trying to make tweaks as we do the work to try to improve it. Could we scale up for London? Sure. I mean, from technological perspective, we have the Groundskeeper tool. We have it hosted on a computational server. We've already talked to a range of community scrutiny groups, for example, about look at this tool we've developed. Do you think this is something that could be useful? And the kind of yes, kind of bite our hands off. So the scalable aspect, from a technological perspective, the scalability would be there. The wider aspect, though, I think, Matt, as well, that I'd be not worried but concerned about is in any kind of wider scaling up, could we provide the tool to London scrutiny groups? Yes, no problem at all. Is there the underlying infrastructure and processes to ensure that it goes to the right people? They know how to use it. They're using it. They're getting feedback. There's the wider kind of not necessarily training as such, but definitely some kind of support that we'd want to put into place rather than just sticking the tool on a website and letting people go hog wild.
Yeah.
So that would then be on us, potentially in wider MOPAC, to support that. Because obviously it's a key area of oversight for the mayor, for MOPAC. So it could absolutely be a tool. Then likewise, that same question nationally, well, from a technological perspective, could we do it? Sure. But how would you get it out to the right people nationally? Who are the right people nationally? That in itself is a discussion. But could it be done? Hopefully. Fingers crossed, touch wood. That's a direction we want to head towards.
Okay, thank you. Just to return to David's other two questions, I think who are the three stop and search experts and who peer review? Are you able to say about who peer reviewed, or was that done anonymously? What was the process there?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, MOPAC has a disproportionality board that is obviously sat a range of experts across London that sit on. That disproportionality board is supported by an expert reference group. Those are the individuals that we worked with in terms of developing the coding framework, and they're the ones that did the coding. So, for example, the main lead that we worked with in that group is someone that's been involved in local community stop and search monitoring groups for the past decade or more. So they've got experience in kind of local community scrutiny and stop and search. So that's the kind of individuals we were working with. In terms of the peer reviewers, that's a good question. It was peer reviewed by a number of organizations. I've got a MOPAC colleague online who may want to put something in the chat. But we had it peer reviewed by a policy perspective and a technological perspective. So we had experts on both of those areas. We had specific tech experts from, I think like from a number 10 data science team. We had tech experts from College of Policing and the Home Office review it. And I think the Home Office and College of Policing also reviewed it from a more policy perspective. So a range of kind of in-depth peer review, technologically sharing the code, and from a policy perspective, at least 3 different organizations. And I can see Anthony, my MOPAC colleague, is typing. He'll be correcting me if I've got that wrong.
He's coming. Great. Okay. So Lax from Youth Endowment Fund has asked a question. I know he used to work in the Met and he's had to drop off, so he's not able to clarify this. But he asked, does a study suggest that grounds for stop and search of Black Londoners were backfilled with an attempt to over-justify weak grounds? I mean, that's going to be difficult for you to answer, I guess. But do you think that's a plausible hypothesis?
Yeah, I can't answer that question. Because we don't have anything on individual grounds being back. We wouldn't know, even if that was happening, we wouldn't know. And all I would say to that, if they were being backfilled to make things look stronger, that didn't quite work because we saw lower levels of quality for Black Londoners. But yeah, I can't really go into that.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. He's asked that question and then gone, so it's difficult to follow up on. Nice one, Lax. My colleague Helen, who is on her second day with SEBP, is asking whether you looked at shift patterns alongside the timeline. So you've got 6 to 7 a.m. being lowest quality, and is that again? There's going to be some supposition in here, I guess. But officers towards the end of their duty, any sort of plausible theory there about whether that entry time is affecting the quality?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So we haven't looked at that aspect. We looked at what you saw on the slide in terms of there's hours along the bottom and quality within the graph itself. But no, we haven't looked at that.
Any comparison between different units, Paul? Neighbourhood versus response, or different parts of policing population?
I'm sure we did look at that aspect because obviously, in terms of the modelling we did, kind of the TSG came out of one of the aspects that were predicting lower levels of quality. So that was the biggest difference in terms of the quality of grounds. So we were able to split it by type. The one that came out was TSG, as I said in the presentation. So that was the one that came out. Shift pattern. So you wouldn't look at shift patterns. Again, we're in the position now where we have 2024 data and we've asked for 2025 data, and each of those we're exploring what other bits can we put in the analytics. So as I mentioned, length of service is something we've added for the 2024 data to look at. Does length of service impact on anything? It's inequality. For the 2025, we've also asked for things like repeat stops. So would repeat stops on individuals who repeat in a certain time period? Can we get that information to overlay quality by repeat stops? Would be interesting. So we're still looking for other things to look for, to split by, to put in the model that we do. So yeah, I'm interested if there's other areas, shift time, start, finish, maybe. We're at that moment where we get New Year's data, we can then explore it by different ways.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Grounds appears hard at the end of a night duty, 5 to 6 a.m. So I'm looking at the chat as well. Yeah, I mean, the question would be: is the 5 to 6 is that related to the shift quality, or the kind of the end of a night duty, or is that just the lowest volume in stop and search? We know there's low volume in stop and search at that time, and it's trying to disentangle those aspects. But yeah, we can try and look at that in more detail.
Yeah, and that's and Anthony, follow up on that point. That's was really interesting.
Oh, and sorry, I can see that Anthony just put the peer reviewers. Oh, I was right. Look at that. Home Office, College of Policing, and Technical Review. Previously 10DS, now Palantir. Okay, yeah, I was right. Okay, good stuff.
So Tina Wallace from Thames Valley asks about the free text grounds behind the going equipped category. So does the analysis explore, have you been able to explore combinations of items described in those grounds and how they appear alongside behavioral or contextual factors, which I guess the question really is that feasible to do in terms of trying to look at patterns in the free text? I'm guessing that might be beyond the scope of what you've looked at up to this point.
So looking at certain, so I understand the certain types of.
So the context is Tina is the architect of Project Vigilant, which is proactive policing to intervene with unwanted sexual behaviour and nighttime economy, doing a bad job of paraphrasing your masterpiece, Tina. But obviously with spotting behavioural patterns and then finding people going equipped for committing sexual offences. So I think the question, I am filling in some blanks here. Tina will tell me in the chat if I'm on the money. The question is really one of whether the grounds of the stop and search there are marrying up, I think, to the types of items that are being found.
So I don't think we'll have looked at that so far, but theoretically, could that be done? So if we were able to say we are specifically interested in these combinations of things, and if we see these combinations of these things, could we do that? I don't see why we wouldn't, or we couldn't do that. I've just seen Anthony in the chat. We didn't look specifically going quick. Could we do that? Yes. So yeah, if we.
Does that become a question of training the model around what to see?
Yeah, in the same way that there probably could be a few ways you can do it. The one way I'd prefer to do it is then, as we did in this piece, have the specific look at the specific things we're interested in, do some tests. So you have the humans doing the work in advance, and then training the models on that. It could be done backwards as well. So you would do it you could do the coding first and then backwards run it via the humans, so to speak. There could be a few ways, but yeah, if we were interested in certain combinations of things that are happening, could we get the model to look at those? Yeah. It's just then how we then verify it.
Okay, that's one for you to think about there, Tina.
And if that is the point, by all means, reach out separately, and then we could explore what's viable. Absolutely.
Yeah, terrific. Okay. You mentioned that the response has been pretty good. Can you tell us a little bit about the response and what, if anything, I guess the question would apply to MOPAC as well as to the Met, but what's different in the pipeline, or what does that response look like on the ground?
In terms of from MOPAC, let's have a think, and then what's different on the ground. I mean, in terms of from a MOPAC perspective, as I said during the slides themselves, in terms of kind of the key aspect of our oversight and sort of stop and search, is absolutely key aspect of the oversight work that we have done. So we're very much at the stage where we're kind of in the look at this analytics work we've done. It's very much kind of really innovative work, and we're very much in the go out there and talk to people stage of that, be it HMRC, FRS, be it other police forces who are interested in what we've done, be it scrutiny groups, be it community groups. We're very much at that stage of the work, right? We have used it in terms of our oversight perspective at kind of London policing boards and had discussions at that level with mayor and police in that way. But it's very much at the, we've just done this work, this is what it's saying, and we're kind of in the, the descriptive, let's spread the word, let's speak to the APCC, let's speak to the HMRC FRS in terms of this is what we have. The real use that we'll then be able to do is, as I said, it's then, from our perspective in some of the oversight territory, we'll be able to pull out specific aspects from the research that we'll be able to hold the Met to account for. Now, remember, there are a number of bits of research, I'm just focused on the grounds one. Within the other bits of research, there are specific aspects around procedural justice. There are specific aspects around certain areas of London around disproportionality. And for the grounds one, we have aspects or really clear lines we'll be able to draw in terms of quality over time, quality year by year, and then be able to hold the Met to account to improvements at that level. So it's very much around kind of setting oversight goals at that level. But it's also about then trying to support the Met in terms of that kind of local level learning and local level improvement. And that's why I came back to the slides that I had in terms of Met response, in terms of their commitments around, the Met made a range of commitments around taking it away and using it internally, using it at a local level, folding it into their supervision process with officers around grounds. There'll be some of those aspects as well we'll be able to get involved in and oversee. So I think there's lots of potential here in terms of how this can be used from an oversight perspective as well as from a research perspective, because for me those two things are the same. Our research is oversight. It's not research oversight. It is the same. But I think the research has only come out a couple of months. If you come back in another 6 months, another 12 months, then we can say, aha, we've ran 2024 data and Met, this has got worse, this has got better. That gives us then the levers through which we'll then have more discussions with the Met over time.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Another one from David. Do you publish the data for Asian, East Asian, other ethnicities? And if not, why not?
Do we publish the data?
Yeah, I guess David's asking, do you have you obviously you're looking at Black Londoners here. Are you looking at this from the angle of other ethnicities as well?
So the focus of this work was white and Black Londoners, but do we have that data? Yes. And some other aspects that we did in the full published product do specifically look at Asian Londoners around disproportionality. So the answer is yes, but this specific work was focused on white versus Black. But for future years, yes, we could do that.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and is that driven just through the priorities of MOPAC? How does that terms of reference come to you, Paul?
Well, again, so this work kind of had origins in the MOPAC disproportionality board, in terms of officer stop and search, somewhat contested power. We see clear disproportionalities of stop and search, and there was specific research on stop and search, as I mentioned, that has Black Londoners seeing vague and more subjective grounds. So the key research question in this piece was to verify that at a much larger scale.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful.
Some of the other pieces that we did, again, were linked to requests from a deputy mayor in terms of, understanding what's driving levels of disproportionality. And in that one, we specifically looked at Asian disproportionality, Black disproportionality, and so on. So it's very much driven by kind of the needs of the organization. But we would have that data, so we could look at that.
Okay, terrific. Shay asks a question here about how the model quality was tested, so that we're getting into the technical side of the data science here. Tested for accuracy and the process of doing manual rechecking on outcomes in that model training process. And I don't know whether that's something you want to ask Anthony to comment on in the chat, or whether you want to sort of drill into that a little bit without drowning us in the data science.
I'd probably invite Anthony, if you don't mind, in terms of the detail, because I could talk from a very general level about the different models we did and the different kind of ROC curves we did to check for accuracy. But I think, Anthony, if you're there, it'd be easier if you were to
Anthony, you can probably put your camera on. I think I have got you set up to do that. So yeah, let's hope you've your camera ready. He's gone for a cup of tea. Huh? Let's try him now. There he is.
Hi. Go on, remind me of the question.
How was the model trained for quality, Anthony? What sort of manual checking of the outcomes went on? How did you calibrate it?
It wasn't a model on quality. The model, it was a collection of between 19 and 32 different models trained to identify each of the factors in the larger sample. The quality of those models was assessed in the normal way that you would do a regression model. And although the scores were okay, I don't have them by me, but because of the size of the sample, we were able to rely on the model. Because, as you know, the more accurate something is, the larger the sample, the more you can rely on it. The precision doesn't matter over a large sample. So given all those models scored on a huge amount of data, when you add them all together, you make the quality score, and the quality score as a composite measure is accurate enough to make the conclusions that we have across the different things that we looked at here. The real thing that helped this project was the sheer size of the data.
And is it something then in future years you go back and you'll be looking at doing future training iterations, or are you going to rely on the roots of the model you've got now? So
the quality, the precision of the model is based on the coding that happened on the 600 sample that's then trained out. We could go back and code more using people to identify whether the thing in the coding framework was described in the grounds text. We're actually thinking of going the other way around this time and using the model to identify factors that happen in the text, and then using humans to verify how well the model picks it up. And that should enable us to do a lot more checking and improve the quality of models significantly, and make a lot more coded variables than we have currently. So yes, it's going to be an iterative improvement of this process, and we will reach the point where we've something really powerful that's able to understand everything that goes on in that recorded text.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Anthony. You're a good sport for coming on and explaining that. And I think Shay has suggested there that a follow-up would be really helpful. David says, last question for him, the 3.49 times predicted estimate of disproportionality on page 3. How did you get to that number? I don't know if you could just talk us through. It's difficult to go into on-the-spot calculations in that way, but I don't know if you want to just sort of give a précis of how your disproportionality statistics were calculated, just so we can size that up to the norm.
So when you say the disproportionality statistics on page 3, so I think the question is talking about one of the other chunks of research in our published pack. I think that is, because obviously my page 3 on here is just a very simple. We've done other work. So I'm happy to talk about the other piece.
Let's park it, because we think we're going to do another one on that. So David, if that does relate to the other report, we will do another session on those different parts of the analysis. So forgive me, I have made the assumption that was on slide 3. So let's just pop that to one side. Okay, I think we're getting there. I think the only thing we're going to ask is whether these slides are shareable, and I think, Paul, you are quite happy. I think there actually might be on a version of them online already, but we'll certainly get those out to people afterwards. You've given us a really comprehensive tour of, groundbreaking piece of work, which has got lots of potential to feed into other areas. So I'm really grateful for your time in doing that. And what we'll do is we will obviously invite people who registered for this to send in further questions after today and follow up, and we'll track the progress of this in future years, because I think it's going to be fascinating when you can start stacking this up year on year and taking it into other areas of the Met. Also equally be interesting to see what happens when it goes to other parts of the country as well. So really grateful for you both sharing your experiences of this new piece of analysis, which I think is sort of going to be quite frontier breaking. What we will do after this is make this recording available with some clip notes. We will signpost you to what's online, and we'll give a copy of the slides as well. And we are planning future sessions on this piece of work, so we can really get into the technicalities of how some of this methodology works. It will be really interesting to see what the Met do in the future around response to this type of analysis as well. But just to say thank you to Paul and to Anthony for coming on there at the end. It's really, really good to hear from you both. Just a reminder that behind me is that QR code. So if you can scan that and tell us what you think of the session, we'd be really, really grateful. And otherwise, we will see you next time. Thank you very much.